They and people from Green Mountain Christian Center were able to do the very hard job of turning our boutique over from winter into summer. And they really worked hard, and we're grateful for that. Just an example of some of our great volunteers. There's a special lady here tonight named Linda who makes us some beautiful baby blankets as well, and we want to thank her as well. We want to address the fact about our ultrasound machine. You all know that we were a medical clinic. We do still have the ultrasound table and the ultrasound machine and the exam table. We've been in great prayer about becoming a medical clinic again, praying that God would give us medical oversight again, because when we suspended our original medical director was unfortunately saying she wasn't able to continue with us. So we've been praying, and just last week, a doctor walked right in, unbeknown to us. Heidi didn't know he was a doctor.
How was I supposed to know?
I was in California, and he said, "Do you guys love your ultrasound machine?" And she goes, "Yeah, but we just don't have any medical oversight." And he goes, "Well, I'm a doctor, can I do it?" So that is another thing that's in the making. There have been so many things going on that we can't even absorb all the blessings. So just so you know that we'll be doing that soon. We also just acquired one new curriculum. It's sexual health. It's called Special Circumstances. It teaches about sex in you, the heart of the matter, STD and STI avoidance, choosing marriage, and making the commitment. And we already have 2 of our clients who will be beginning this next week. So those are some of the things that I wanted to mention. There's so many more, but you'll hear more about them in a little bit.
I just wanted to say thank you guys very much, and Pastor Bill Strader will be sharing with us this evening, and I hope that you can see a little bit more about our center and learn a little bit more and learn where we came from and learn where we're going. So I think God has some awesome things in store for us, and I often say to Joanne, God needs to slow down the blessings, and she's like, no. But sometimes it happens so fast that I really can't keep up with it.
I just say, get your running shoes on, sister. And hold your seatbelt.
She does. So let us take you back to once upon a time here and learn about our center. So thank you.
Next, we will hear from a former client of the Pregnancy Center who will give us her testimonial, Denise Lonergan.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Denise, and I went to CareNet in. Can you hear me? Yes. So I ended up going to CareNet in 2015. I was 38. And I surprised pregnant with my second one, because I had my first one when I was 17. So she was already 20. But, and I went there because I was completely a drug addict, and not a little drug addict. I was shooting heroin on a daily basis, and I was pregnant. So that was a big surprise. And so I ended up going there, and the reason was because I went to get on a Suboxone program because I found out that I was pregnant, and I wanted to get off, but it's not, it's easier said than done. But I knew I had to, being pregnant. So I went, and they took one look at my arms and called Child Protective Services before my child was even born. So I figured, I was still doing heroin, waiting to get on the program, and I went in there, and I figured I'd take the parenting classes and go through the motions of going through, you know, whatever, even if I was still using, but I could trick them at CareNet, you know, so I could totally fool them. And, you know, I wasn't expecting, you know, that I ended up with Joanne, who obviously, you know, had my number from when I walked in the door. I didn't find that out till like a couple weeks ago, though. But, so she knew, but I never got any of that judgment or anything like that when I went in there. Never. They never said a word to me about it. And, you know, I worked and, so I was going to introduce you to Ryan and Randy, but Ryan's not known for his cooperation. So this is my son Ryan, he's 3, and his dad Randy. You want to say hi? Say hi. Okay. Okay. So I went to CareNet. So anyway, like I said, CPS was called on me even before Ryan was born. And the second he was born, they filed a petition to get custody of him from the hospital, which I was a mess. So I had to Randy had to go into court and testify, and get full custody of Ryan because they didn't want me home with my baby. By that time, I had stopped using. I was taking Suboxone, and Ryan was in the hospital going through withdrawal from Suboxone, which was a lot less than what it would have been had I still been using it at that time. And honestly, it was so late in the pregnancy I was still using that I wasn't quite sure what they'd find in there, you know. But I knew they wouldn't find heroin, but I thought they might find, you know, something else. And then they'd really take them from me. And I got lucky with the fact that his dad was able to get custody of him. But just in case, we had his brother and sister-in-law in the courtroom because I thought, even if dad gets custody, they may not let me go home because they didn't want me in the house with my own baby. So that was enough of a wake-up call, you know, to you know, say, hey, this has got to stop at some point. And then, I continued going to CareNet. And the other thing they asked while I was in court was, did I have everything for the baby? Randy and I both worked, but I spent all my money on drugs, and I spent every cent of Randy's money on drugs, so there was nothing left for a baby, you know. And I remember Joanne knocked on my door in one afternoon. She's like, let's go shopping, you know. And I'm a mess, and my arms were a mess, and I looked like, she has pictures of that day. You wouldn't believe I was the same person because I looked disgusting, terrible, drug addict, the worst you've ever seen. So we went shopping, we got everything for the baby, and that was one of the things they asked in court was, do I have everything in the home that I need to take him home? And if I'd said no, they wouldn't have been able to send him home. And they said yes. And she believed in me, I think, when I didn't believe in myself. And I wasn't sure that I could do it, and I managed to do it. A couple of months later, after going through programs and graduating the programs, staying off drugs, for real, not tricking anybody, you know, myself. Custody back, you know, even though he stayed with me because of Randy, he was able to stay home with me, and I was able to breastfeed him. He was able to stay home, but only because his father was there. So I was able to take him home, and I was able to go through everything and get my custody back after a few months. And now I think it's been 3.5 years that I've been clean. So. Anyway, I just want to say, I think, Karen, and I did. I walked out and I think I was going to do that. I mean, I was only fooling myself, but I was going to fool them. They were going to write me great letters for court, and they did. And she knew, but she wrote the letter anyway because she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Like, I had no intention of ever doing the right thing, or, you know, mostly because I had planned on taking care of Ryan and doing all that, but also doing drugs sometimes. And, you know, that never works out. So, and, you know, and the other thing was I was planning on tricking them. I wasn't planning on making lifelong friends and meeting people that really cared about me and that I cared about. And then it became, oh God, you know, every time I went to do something, I thought, God, I can't let them down. You know, so even though I wasn't worried about letting myself down, I was worried about letting the ladies there down. you know, and Joanne and Noreen and Mackenzie. So anyway, so like I said, now it's been 3.5 years. Ryan's happy, healthy, and we owe a lot of that to him. I want to say thank you. I was nervous in front of crowds.
Sober is like
Last I would never, I would don't tell you, I'm not nervous at all. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
All right,
It's beautiful. Thank you. You're welcome.
tonight, let's take a moment to recognize the founders of Bennington's original pregnancy center. And as I say your name, if you please stand, you can stay standing so you're all standing. Ted Rice. He's not here. Okay. Bill and Sue Church. Peter and Melinda Mull. Okay. Bill and Doris Strader. Thank you for your hard work and your vision. I will now introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, Reverend William Strader. Originally, he hails from Morgantown, West Virginia, where he earned an undergraduate degree in religious studies at the University of West Virginia at Morgantown. He then attended the Alliance Theological Seminary in Nyack, New York, and Weinbrenner Theological Seminary for his Master's of Divinity. At Ashland Theological Seminary, he did take courses in his doctoral studies. From 1980 to 1992, he served in Bennington, Vermont, as the pastor of the Alliance Church. In 1985, he, Bill Church, and Ted Rice from his congregation, they prayed and they strategized to found the first pregnancy center, which became the forerunner of today's True North Pregnancy Resource Center, an affiliate of CareNet. He also founded the Hoosick Falls Community Alliance Church. Since 1992 to today, he's currently pastor of the First Alliance Church in Bucyrus, Ohio. He is a dynamic preacher with a heart for the lost, the unborn, and seeking revival in our land. Pastor Bill Strader.
Yeah. Okay, that was Joanne Brown who wrote that. My good friend, and so dynamic preacher. Of course, they had to say something to get me here. But this has been a great part of our journey. We came here 1980, right out of seminary. Honestly, we didn't know anything about ministry. God didn't save me until I was 21 years old. And so we're entering ministry, and fortunately, we came underneath a pastor who put his arm around us. The first Sunday said, "Here's our pastor," and I didn't know a thing. And he was very gracious. Johnny Carson, some of you know him, an extraordinary man of encouragement. And so he took me to the hospital that day. He said, "I'm going to show you how to do a hospital visit." And we did the hospital visit. He led someone to the Lord. He said, "That's how you do it." And anyone who knows him, he was just a real gem, him and his wife Moon. So we were here, and we were here from 1980 to 1992. And along the way, people would say, "So, how long have you been in Bennington?" I'd say, 5 years now, 6 years. And they say, "In your first church?" I didn't know how many churches you were supposed to have. So no one ever told me that. So after 12 years, the Lord kind of directed us elsewhere. And now we've been in Bucyrus. You did a great job. Bucyrus, not Lucky Russ. Bucyrus. And we were in Bucyrus. We are in Bucyrus. We've been there for 27 years. And I don't know how long you're supposed to stay. So they want me out. I guess they're going to have to turn me out or something. Well, I want to say this, that the Bible talks about that, I've got this verse written down so I don't miss it, but here, it goes right here. How good and pleasant it is when God's people dwell together in unity, for there is where the blessing of the Lord is. Psalm 133. And that is so true, and that's what you have here. In this church, and in this church, and in this church. And you unite together like that, and nothing can stop you. No force in hell can stop you. And I'm very proud to have an early part of this. I want to tell you how it started, and I'm going to mention some of the people that I recall as it started. And my memory may not be crystal clear on this. I'll do the best I can. But this started because there was a man, his name was Dr. Francis Schaeffer. How many have heard of Dr. Francis Schaeffer? A philosopher, a theologian, an author, a brilliant scholar. And he started a community in 1955 in Switzerland called Le Brie. And they started a Christian community, and it was a place for people to go who were really seeking questions about God. And really wanted to know about God and about life and what life is about. And Dr. Schaeffer wrote a book, and the book was entitled, in 1976, it was called How Shall We Then Live? And this was a book that addressed culture, Western culture, and he was beginning to see it downward spiral. And his issue was, it was losing its religious conscience. The church is to be the conscience of culture. And it was no longer being the conscience of culture, and it was downward spiraling. So he wrote this book. And the book did very well, and so they turned the book into a movie. So in 1984, exactly 35 years ago, 1984, we showed that movie in our church. And we showed it, I think it was during the summer, and we showed it every night. And I don't remember how many weeks, let's say it was 10 weeks, and we showed that movie. And after seeing this, we felt so convicted. We felt we would sin against God if we didn't do something. Now, the abortion issue was voted on in 1973. He wrote his book in 1976, and he just said, "Church, you got to rise up. You got to do something. You've got to become the conscience of this culture again." And so after watching that, we knew we had to do something. So in 1984, after watching the movie, Bill and Ted and some of us, we just began to ask the question, what are we going to do? What can we do? What can be done? And so by the end of 1984, in January 1985, we kind of organized somewhat officially. And we began to meet at Bill's house, which was right across the street from my house. And David and Midge Chino from North Bennington, American Baptist Church. Some of you know the Chinos, knew the Chinos. A great couple, and they were a part of it. And Ted Rice and Kathy and Bill, and so we just began to discuss. And so that's where it all began. And as we began to organize, things began to develop, and we just began to put this thing together as best we knew how. We didn't know how. We were just kind of fumbling along and doing things as we came to that. But in 1984, we began to meet, and we began to pray, and we began to discuss this, and decided we need to get out, and we needed to let other people know and try to get other people. And we needed volunteers, and we needed workers, and we needed idea people, and we needed people to become a part of this, what was developing into a board. So in 1984, we kind of affiliated. In 1984, we got a tax exemption. We found out there were these crisis pregnancy centers. I guess I go back to CareNet. I didn't know that's what part of the organization was, but they had already started out of the Billy Graham organization, and they were doing things around the country, and we heard about it, so we wanted to do something similar here. So we began to meet, and Bill and Ted began to go in different churches and speak wherever they had the occasion, to tell people what we wanted to do, to recruit volunteers, and so forth. And so that's what happened in 1984. In 1985, it became officially incorporated. We got our tax exemption status, And we decided, we found somebody that would serve as a director, and it was Marty. Marty was our first director, so give her a hand. Let's see if I can find, in my notes here, we had, she was the first director. We had, let's see. I know Peter Maul came on and began to work with us and became very active. He was a treasurer. My wife was a treasurer. Peter says that she trained him, and he became the treasurer. Then he became a president. Bennington Vermont was the second president, and Jenny Vassy was the third president, I think, something like that in that order. And so this is how it began. Then Peter Maul was the fourth. And so now we're into the third year. It's organized. Other churches are getting involved. And so now we're trying to find a location. And I do believe, Marty, you can help me with this. I think the first location was on Vermont Avenue, River Street, the corner, where there's the kitchen, food kitchen there now, still there. And that was the first location. It changed several places. You heard the most recent location, which I went into yesterday. And I want to tell you, it's a spectacular place. With beautiful people, as you've already heard, and with great heart, great love, great passion, great care, and what a nice testimony, Denise. Thank you so much, recipient of the love and the blessing that's going out from this community to help people in these issues of struggling with crisis pregnancies of different sorts. And so that's kind of how it happened, and then it just continued to develop and grow and so forth. So that's how it all started. I want to speak for a few moments about why it started, and why did it start, and why did other ones start around this nation? And that's really an important question to answer. And you should know it started because the worst decision the Supreme Court of the United States ever made was in 1973, when they convinced medical professionals that this would be okay. And they convinced young families, young people married or unmarried with crisis pregnancy that no, it's okay. It's okay to kill that baby before the baby comes out of the womb. It's okay. And people, since it was now legal, people began to think, well, if it's legal, maybe it is okay. And that began to change the thinking in America, and we began to plummet from that point on to this day, and no less than 60 million abortions that have occurred, which God is not at all pleased with. Amen. So that's why we got involved, and that's why we had to get involved, and that's why people all around the country got involved. And that, of course, is why you're here today. You know, it's really difficult to imagine what 60 million is like. And so tonight I was thinking about that. I want to kind of try to do my best to illustrate this. You understand that life begins, well, for Jesus, it began at least at conception. Would you agree? I mean, for Jesus, it began at conception. And John the Baptist, wow, he was filled with the Holy Spirit while he was in the womb. And I want to suggest to you tonight that life begins in the mind of God ever before you even thought about conception. So I want to suggest to you, it doesn't just begin at conception. God's already had this thought out. God's already had this plan out. And no birth is an accident. No conception is an accident. And by the time this conception begins to happen, God is already well in the process. And from the very point of conception, everything that's needed for that child, eyes, ears, fingers, toes, heart, lungs, is compacted in some extraordinary way in this thing we call DNA. And here in this DNA is everything that's needed for that child to come to being. And so next time someone says, well, life starts at viability, well, see, that's an old argument. Because viability used to be down the road 24 weeks or so. Now it's way back. Science has just proven so much. And I'm so grateful for this heartbeat bill. Because, you know, many women do not know they're pregnant by the 6th week. And many do, of course.
That's right.
But by then the heart is beating. And this could stop 70, maybe 80% of abortions. That's a good thing. And we should be very thankful about that. So here's what the Bible says. Psalm 139 says this. For you were created in the inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Your eyes saw my unformed body, not small formed body, not mostly formed body, but unformed body. God saw it before it ever began, before the conception ever occurred. And all of the days for me were written and recorded in your book before even one came into being. And that one day could be the very first day of conception. And they were all written out. And in the New Testament, we are told that in the book of Ephesians, chapter 1, verse 4, it says this. For he chose us in him when? Before the creation of the world. I'd say that predates conception, wouldn't you? When you think about when life began, I want you to think it began in the mind of God well before the conception. And I'm happy with the conception argument. And I will accept the conception argument, but nothing later than that. So let me try to illustrate as best I know how about this whole thing about 60 million babies. And let's pretend this is a child building block. And this is a little oversized. And let's pretend that's about an inch, because that's about what a lot of the wood ones are, say an inch. So if you begin to stack these up, and each one's going to represent an aborted baby, you begin to stack these, and by the time I would reach 12, of course, we would have a foot. And by the time I reached 75, anybody with math here, good, like numbers, 75, how high is 75?
6'3" inches.
That's my height. 75. And once we keep stacking, and we stack until we get to the point of this ceiling. The height of this ceiling is 120 baby blocks, 1 inch high. And the outside of the building is 360. And the clouds that we see every day as we drive around are 72,000. And a jet flies that we see in the sky at 420,000, which is 35,000 feet, which is about 6 miles up. And you would keep stacking until you reached about 5 or 6 miles, where a jet plane rides through the atmosphere, or above the atmosphere. It's about 6 miles, 11,000 miles high. Now that's the amount of abortion that has occurred since Roe v. Wade in 1973. And I'm here to tell you, God doesn't like it. Let's put it another way. How many of you in here today know somebody, a friend, a family member, or somebody that has died somewhere in war because of war? Raise your hand. You know somebody. Your heart is grieved because somebody you know, somebody you love, has died in war. Well, the bloodiest war that was ever fought in this country was the Civil War. About 600,000 people in the Civil War. Americans in the Civil War. And you add up all the people in America that have died from all the wars we've ever fought, World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, Iraq War, put them all together, and you've got 2.8 million people have died from all the wars, all the Americans that have ever died. 2.8 million. Not 60 million, 2.8 million. You take 2.8 million, all the people that ever died, Americans in all the wars, and you multiply by 21 times. And then you've got the amount of people that the United States of America has killed in abortion. Let's just do it this way. Let's just do it with population. In this wonderful state that I love so much, there's 600,000 people. Not 60 million people, there's 600,000 people. You put all of New England together, that's 12 million people in New England. 12 million people. 12 million people. Throw New York State in there. New York State's 20 million people. Throw that in there. And you still only have half of the amount of people that were killed in total in abortion in the last 46 years. Let's do it this way. Let's take all the states with the least populated and begin to add up all the population of the least populated states in the United States, and let's just see how far we can go until we can exhaust all the population in the states until we reach 60 million. The answer to that is there are 28 states. You have to add 28 states up. Can you imagine? 28 states gone, vacant, nobody there. Because of this thing, abortion. You know, I did just a little research because, you know, the amount of countries in the world are always changing. My recent study showed 228 countries in the world. 228 countries in the world. How many countries do you think are underneath the population of 60 million? How many countries in the world do you think are under the population of 60 million? And the answer is, if I can find it here. The answer is, I skipped a couple illustrations so we're not here all night. I can tell you this much. The answer is 90% of them. This is about 180. In the world, of all the nations in the world, 90% of them are less than 60 million. 90% of them would have been wiped out from this whole concept of abortion. Now, the quantity of abortion is staggering. And I just wanted to kind of help paint a little picture. But the quality is even greater. Atrocity than the quantity. Because you know every child that is killed in abortion was created in the image of God Almighty. God Almighty. We're not talking about animals or humans, and if you're an animal lover, that's great. I love animals too, but animals aren't human. God created humans in His image. And God created humans in His image, and when we kill these humans carelessly like we do an abortion, we're striking out at Almighty God. It's a sin against humanity, and it's a sin against God. So, what we're doing is we're trying to snuff out something that is the most precious thing on the face of this earth. Human beings made in the image of God. Jesus was asked about this whole idea, and He said this: what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? So, He's making this comparison that one soul is greater than all the world, everything in the world. This room, this food, what a nice banquet, what a wonderful, all of our churches, all of these buildings, all of our homes, all of our cars, all of our money, all of our gold, all of our silver, all of our treasury, all the banks, everything, put all together in one soul is worth more than that. In Jesus' eyes, we're talking 60 million. One soul. And so you remember one time the disciples were bringing, people were trying to bring their children up, like this child here, up to Jesus. The disciples, no, don't bother the Master. No. And Jesus, the Bible says, was indignant. Indignant. By the way, 211 of the 233 nations are under 60 million. 211 out of 233 nations are under 60 million. So, indignant. Jesus was indignant. And He said, you bring them because such is the kingdom of God. This is what the kingdom of God is about. These tender ones, these innocent ones, these ones who trust and have faith, and these ones who are vulnerable and weak and can't take care of themselves. You take care of them. And it'd be better for a person to have a millstone tied around his neck and thrown into the deepest sea than to let one of these little ones keep them away from me. See, that's the value of a soul in God's eyes. And in God's priority, children are way up at the top. especially those who can't care for themselves. It's our job to care for them. So I want to make 3 observations tonight. And the first observation is this. God is life. Life is from God. So the more you move to God, the more you love life. Let's think about that. Jesus said, in John chapter 3, verse 19, he said, I am the light, and those who love light, they come to me. If they don't love light, they stay away from me, because my light exposes their darkness, so they stay away from me, or they come to me if they want the light. So what I'm saying is, my observation is, the more we move towards God, the more we love life. Life, full, abundant, eternal, in every way we can get it. The more one moves to God, the more one moves to life. Now, this is very clear. You begin to read the Bible, it says in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. He created life. He created man. He says, multiply. And I want to bless you, and I want you to explode. And that's what happened. As man obeyed God, that's exactly what happened. It was God's intention for life to expand and multiply and grow, and for us to enjoy everything. In fact, you begin to look at the early books of the Bible, if you believe those early books, as I do. And people lived a long time. As they were close to God, they lived for just so long. And for 6, 7, 8, 900 years. Just a very long time. And then God said, Abraham, I'm going to bless you, and those who bless, I'm going to bless you, and those who bless you, I will bless them through you, and I'll bless people all over the world. So, Abraham, if you stay close to me, you will be a blessing to people all over the world, and people all over the nations of the world would be blessed because of you. God is saying, I want to give life, and I want to bless people, and I want to bless people all over the world. Now, the Israelites, when they decided to follow God, they got nothing but blessing of life and abundant, and strong life and healthy life. And I think of Solomon and how God blessed him, and God enriched him, and the nation was flourishing and abundant, and a lot of people. Because when you move close to God and you love God, then you begin to love life, because God is of life, life, and life comes from God. And by the way, have you ever stopped to think that over the history, in the last 2,000 years since Christ, that the nations who decided they're going to exalt Christ have really been blessed? Let me mention a few that maybe you haven't thought of. Martin Luther in Germany, the Reformation, they got right with God, and God began to bless them in a great way, and we've been impacted to this day. John Calvin decided he was going to do everything he could for his country, and Switzerland became a center, probably the safest place in the world people could go and experience the greatest blessings in life because of this man influenced the city for God. Then you have John Knox in Scotland, and the same thing. And he was a man after God, and to do everything he could to influence his country. And they became a country after God, and God blessed them. And probably the greatest revivalists that ever came in the world, the majority of them probably came right from Scotland. England, under John Wesley and Whitefield, became the strongest and greatest nation in the world at that time. And the same is true about the United States. And do not forget that we were settled by people, religious people, for religious cause, to honor God in every way they could. Amen. And we had evangelists and revivalists in this country, and God's blessing has been extraordinary, and no country has matched it yet. Right. And it's all because of the blessing of God as people. So that's my first observation. Life comes from God. The closer you move to God, the more you experience life, the more you love life, the more you protect life, the more you're about life. My second observation is the opposite is true. The less one loves God, the less one loves life. And the more one pulls away from God, the more one moves towards death. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sad to say this is very easy to prove. But you can start right with Cain. And here's a man that just left the presence of God. When he left the presence of God, what did he do? But murdered his brother. And you see in the Old Testament, you see Pharaoh, who could not stand Israel's God, could not stand Israel's people. Anti-Semitism began to occur. and wanted to wipe out all the babies because they didn't like the God of the Bible, God, Jehovah, the God of creation. And you see the same thing in the New Testament. You see the same thing with Herod. And you know who else didn't? You know who else didn't love the God of the universe? Hitler. And he hated that God. He hated that God of those Jewish people, so he hated those Jewish people. And so the further he pulled away from God, the more he hated people, and the more he killed them, and the more he murdered them. The statistics of the 20th century is the greatest atrocities that any dictators have ever perpetrated on the face of this earth. And I'm going to give you 3 examples, and I could give you 10. I'll give you 3. 1943 to 1976, Mao Zedong of China, who was an atheist, a communist, and hated God, and wanted to establish a culture without God, killed 45 to 75 million of his own people. Moving away from God, moving away from life, moving towards death. Example number 2, Joseph Stalin. 1941 to 1953, the dictator, the leader of Russia, USSR, hated God, and the atheist, wanted nothing to do with God. The record has between 40 to 60 million people, of his own people, he murdered and killed off. And I've already made allusion to Hitler, but it wasn't just 6 million Jews that he hated and he killed. Oh, he marched and he killed everyone that he could have opposed him, and he killed 17 to 20 million people. A man who wanted nothing to do with God, wanted to get as far away from God as he could, and ended up killing as many people as he could. Between those 3, 100 to 150 million people killed, because the further you go away from God. Now you can say, here's a quote I love. I heard this some weeks ago, that, and you may have, Chavez in Venezuela, communist. Right in the last year, the average person has lost in the country 27 pounds. You cannot put enough money, you cannot carry enough money to buy a loaf of bread. And they're fleeing. By the hundreds of thousands, they're fleeing out. And here's the quote I love. Someone said, the problem, I think it was Trump, said the problem with Venezuela isn't that they tried communism and it didn't work. The problem with Venezuela is they tried communism and it worked. And that's exactly what happened. They're atheistic and they don't want anything to do with it. So let me put it into 21st century. Let me put it into 2019 America. The more you move away from God, the more you move to death. The closer you move to God, the more you move towards life. Now, here's a group of people tonight. This is a group of people strongly religious. Is that true? So say amen. A group of people, cross-section of this community, love God. That's probably generally true about almost everyone, if not everyone in here. Now, let me give you the statistics on this. 78% of evangelical, Bible-believing Christians who love God and seek to obey the Bible, 78% believe abortion should be illegal.
Yes.
Here's another statistic. 72% of atheists and agnostics want abortion to be legal. They want to be able to end life. The Christians do not. The atheists do. Those who love God love life. Those who hate God do not love life. They rather choose death, whether they know it or not. And here's the statistic that 50% of liberal Christians are Christians who haven't made up their mind whether they're really going to believe the Bible or not. 50% of liberal Christians still believe that abortion should be legal. 50%. And here's my third observation. My third observation is God is currently stirring up a remnant to do something to stop this atrocity that I've been talking about tonight. God is on the move. He's stirring up a remnant, and I believe that we're living in a day where we're going to see one of the greatest decisions in history, in my view, the greatest decision in the history of America. We're living in a day, in a generation, that's going to put a stop to abortion. Let me give you 4 reasons why. I want to give you 4 reasons why. I think somewhere in 1915 or so, that's just my personal opinion, and we all probably have different opinion on this, but I really began to see a wind of the Spirit really picking up currency in the United States, and it just people really crying out for God to pour out His Spirit on our nation and change things. Seemed to be a real spirit of prayer. I know our church prayed like we've never prayed before. And I'm talking to other churches and pastors, and they're doing the same thing. And it seems like this great movement of prayer began to occur. For example, how many of you ever heard of Nancy DeMoss Wagamoo? She's a women's leader. She's big out where we're at. And really an extraordinary Christian. She gathered 1 million women to pray for our nation in revival in 1915. How many ever heard of Franklin Graham? Okay, we're doing better there. Franklin Graham, as you may know, in 2015, traveled to every capital in the United States. Did anybody go to any capital and watch and look at this? In Columbus, we took a busload of people down to Columbus. And every place that he spoke, on the Capitol steps, he gave the gospel of Jesus Christ. And every place that he prayed for revival. And every place that he spoke across this country, people gave their life to the Lord Jesus Christ. That's pretty remarkable, wouldn't you say? And so there was such a prayer movement in 2015. That brings me to the second point. Now, if you're really hyper-politically, don't be offended and don't get defensive about this. But I'm telling you, God Almighty put Trump into office as a result of prayer. I'm going to tell you why. No, I don't think Trump's a Christian. He hasn't shown me anything that shows me he's a Christian. But yes, I think he's as friendly to Christians as I've ever seen in my lifetime, anybody. He is friendly to Christians. He is supportive, and he's done a lot. I hope this reception is not bad. It doesn't sound good from where I'm at. Farther. Is that okay? You should have told me a little earlier. Okay, I'm not going to repeat anything. So, it's because of Trump, I will remind you that Neil Gorsuch is a Supreme Court Justice. Brett Kavanaugh is a Supreme Court Justice. And this is really remarkable in 2 years. And it's very likely we could get 3, if not 4, if he stays into office. And you know how he's going to stay into office? That's up to us. That's right. We're going to keep him in office through our prayers. And if we pray, he'll stay in office, no matter what others say. But if we don't pray, they could drive him out of office because the devil hates this. Because I repeat, we're living in the generation, we're going to see Roe v. Wade reversed. Evidence number 3 is the trigger laws that are occurring across our land right now. A trigger law, states are putting together laws that soon as Roe versus Wade is ended, immediately all of these laws come into effect. But not until, because the national law is overriding them, and states are having trouble. But they're putting these laws into effect, and I'm going to give you 3 examples. And one was already given, the heartbeat bill. States are poisoning themselves to the place that as soon as Roe versus Wade goes down, these laws immediately come into effect. And so the heartbeat bill, which you know is at 6 weeks, detecting of a heartbeat, whenever they can detect the heartbeat, you cannot have abortion. Florida, Kentucky, Ohio, South Carolina, and Tennessee are currently trying to get these heartbeat bills in. Now there is a waiting bill. Missouri has a waiting bill. But that means whenever a woman is interested in abortion, from that point, they have to wait 72 hours. Now Now listen to what this has done. There are waiting bills, these trigger bills now, and people are trying to put into legislation these waiting bills. And in Missouri, since they've enacted their waiting bill of 72 hours, their abortion rate has gone down 61%. Amazing. And then there is also, currently, there's 20 pieces of legislation moving towards the Supreme Court right now that are on their way, headed to the Supreme Court. Every one of them will reduce abortion one way or another. So states are sending everything they can, courts are sending everything they can, and that's the third reason why I'm saying that I believe this is going to be overturned. And these states know it, and they see it, and they're preparing themselves. And the fourth evidence I give is this. The left, or those who do not love life and do not protect the baby in the womb, are also getting riled up, if you haven't noticed. They're riled up. The devil hates this, and they're really stirred up. And they're coming up with crazy stuff. And you know this, New York is state, and so it said that, the child comes out, you can still kill the baby. After the baby's out of the womb, you can still kill the baby in the state of New York. Virginia is very close, and so is Vermont. You guys need to pray who live up here in Vermont for that kind of thing. So for these 4 reasons, I believe we're at a historical time. And I want to conclude by saying, what can we do? And I want to answer this question. What can we do? And I want to say to you, I've been in ministry for 39 years. And I'm more convinced than I've ever been, by a long shot, prayer is the most important thing we can do. Prayer is the most important thing. Now, if you're shaking your head, you're agreeing, and you don't go home and you don't pray about this, you don't believe it. See, prayer isn't something you talk about. You don't have a prayer meeting and talk about praying, you read about praying, you study about praying, and then you take 2 minutes and pray. You got to pray. We got to roll up our sleeves. We got to get our knees dirty, and we got to get on our face before God, and we got to pray. Nothing we can do is more important than that. Anybody know about Abby Johnson? The movie comes out tomorrow on Abby Johnson. She became the #1 Planned Parenthood director, and a church down the street from her began to pray for her. And the Spirit of God came upon her to the point she got so convicted, she went into that church and she got converted. And she spoke just south of our town a little while ago, and she draws big crowds, raises big money, and she's raising millions of dollars now against abortion in every way she can to help organizations like True Blood. Well, I want you to know that's because of prayer. There was a businessman in Pennsylvania who had 3 abortion clinics and was doing about 100 abortions a year. Church close by got so burned they began to pray, and they began to pray, and they began to persist like they never prayed before, and he got converted. He closed every one of his abortion clinics, saving hundreds, if not thousands. And that's what prayer will do. You have no greater resource, and we all have access to this resource of prayer. No greater resource. Pray is it. Second thing is act. And now I'm really preaching to the choir. Here you are, giving your evening. You've committed your way in every way you can to volunteers, and all of it is going because of you. You're acting, and you're serving, and you're involving yourself. Peter Moll's not here. Peter Moll says, I know a congressman in New York State. And he said, I'm going to call him and I'm going to talk to him about that terrible decision. And that's what we have to do. We have to contact these people. We have to let them know we will not stand this cannot happen. We've got hundreds, thousands, and millions of people who say, no, this isn't right. So get involved and act. And I'm just going to say something that Joanne might say later. You know this pregnancy center, I went in it yesterday, and it's beautiful. And the building now, the owner wants to sell it, and they want to buy it. Cost them $150,000 if they buy it. Now, if they were able to buy that, The $1,000 of rent that they pay every month, they won't have to pay. So there's $12,000 they can use in ministry. Well, if they own it, it's their building. And that means the upstairs apartments could someday be used for expanding their ministry. They could double, they could triple. Amen? Let me hear amen.
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 So I want to really encourage you to pray and to give and support in every way you can. And lastly, I want to say persist. You know, right now as I'm speaking, in my hometown, there's a meeting, and we put together an organization that reaches benevolent care, ministry people, transit people, and it's only 5 years old. And you know, we had 300 clients this year. We provided transportation. We provided shelter. We provided housing. We provide food. We provide education. We got GEDs. We got people job training and so forth and so on. And tonight they're voting whether to dissolve it because we think it should have a statement of faith to stay Christian. And some liberals are moving in and saying, no, we don't want this to be Christian. We just want this to be nice. And so Satan is out to stop whatever God is doing. And so I'm saying persist, persist, persist. You know the passage? And here it is. Let us not become weary in well-doing. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest. At the proper time, we will reap a harvest. If we do not give up. If you give up, you won't reach the harvest. So Elijah's out praying on the edge of the mountain. But what if he only prayed once? No cloud, forget it. Twice, no cloud, forget it. 3 times, no. What would have happened? He wouldn't have seen the miracle. Persist, persist, persist. If we who are sinful people know how to give good gifts to our children, how much more will our Heavenly Father give us? We will come and ask and seek and knock. So God's done some great things in the past. And I'm glad we had just a little humble part of it because this is extraordinary. And we're all just doing what we all know we need to do. We just need to come together and stand up and stand for something like this. But I do want to leave you with this thought. It's been a good past. It's been a good 34 to 35 years. But the best is ahead. I would love to die and go to heaven and be a part of the generation that saw abortion reversed. Amen. Nothing would please me more than that. And it can happen. And we are very, very close. Very, very close. So persist. Persist, persist, pray, and never give up. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Slater. That was so fabulous. Please turn your attention to a short video clip concerning the curriculum used at the center. The use of this curriculum is made possible because of generous donors. This excerpt features the creator of Earn While You Learn, Diana Conner.
One-on-one with a young woman and just teaching her, something happened. She responded not just to the information she learned, which she loved, but to the time and the obvious investment I was making in her life. With that encouragement, I started writing more lessons and more girls came. The problem was that I could teach the lessons, but our client advocates oftentimes didn't have the confidence to. And that's when I formed the whole concept of Earn While You Learn. I wrote the lessons out so that anybody could present them. We decided to give them mommy money so that they could choose what they wanted, what they needed, what color they wanted. And it wasn't our client advocates giving them a hand out, but rather them being empowered to provide for their children. Once we implemented this program, things started to happen. Our numbers went from, maybe 10 or 20 client visits a month, which is normal for our demographics, to 100, 150 client visits a month. These girls kept coming back and kept coming back because they loved not just the information they were getting, but the time they were spending with their client advocate. They were being mentored and they were bonding. Our client advocates loved it because they were finally sewing into their clients' lives, both practically with the information they taught and eternally by sharing the love of Jesus with these young women. Something else happened that we didn't expect. The dads started coming. They would sit next to their girlfriends and listen to the prenatal lessons, and they were as enthralled as the mothers themselves. Well,